Hello and welcome back to Jimbo's PC Builds. Today I'm going to do another case review. Previously I've looked at the Lian Li Lancool 205 and the Lian Li Lancool 2. Now while they're made by the same manufacturers, they're in different price points and you could argue are aimed at different people. So today I am going to look at the Cooler Master NR600. So it's at a similar price point to the Lian Li Lancool 205, and you could argue it's a direct competitor to it. I saw what the case looked like in Micro Center, and it looked very, very similar in terms of the layout, that kind of stuff. So I thought I'll buy that, put a build in it, test it, and see if it's any good, and see if you could look at that as an option instead of the Lancool 205. Talking of the Lancool 205, I've also managed to get the Lancool 205M, which is the Micro ATX version of the Lancool 205. So I'll be doing a future review of that. So make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon to make sure you don't miss out on that content. So my build's going to be based around a Ryzen 7 3700X and a GeForce RTX 2060. It's a pretty reasonable spec. It should be able to hit any game at 1080p at very, very good frame rates. So before I actually get onto the build, what I'll do is I'll take the case out of the box and I will give you a rundown of all the features. So without further ado, let's crack the box open and have a look at the case. So looking at the case from the side, you can see why I thought it looked like the Lancool 205 when I saw it in Micro Center. It's got the same kind of side design. It's got glass where the power supply basement isn't, and the power supply basement is a solid piece of metal. Now that's a subtle difference between this and the Lancool 205, because the Lancool 205 does actually have vents to help keep the PSU cooler. This does not. The front of the case is where you can immediately start seeing the big difference between this and the Lancool 205. The NR600 has a completely mesh front. What would normally be the front AIO is actually on top, including the power button, and looks like a fan control or reset button on the top, but I'll get to that as I actually do the build and see what it does. But this mesh goes all the way down the front, apart from this decorative strip, which you can't really see. Well, I don't know if you can see, but it's a bit of a finger prick magnet. To access the fans, and to be able to install the fans at the front, you have to pull the cover off. You cannot install unless you put them behind by installing the fans. Cooler Master have installed the one fan you get at the front and they've put it inside. I kind of like that. It does mean the fan is very, very close to the mesh, but I guess it's preference. You could put the fan on the either side, but if you put it in the front, you've got to take the panel off for installation. This front area is solid and doesn't come off, so there's no like front fan mount tray in any way, shape or form. Here you can see the front, the top AIO. It's not the front AIO. You can see you got the power button. I think that's the reset fan control button. And you've got two USB ports here and the old microphone combo jack. It's also got an open space for fans on the top where you've got a removable filter like you have on a lot of cases. When you pick up the case and look underneath and look at the filter on the PSU, you can see this is one of the places where Cooler Masters have cheaped out a little bit to keep the cost down for this case. The filter that they've put on here is just literally a very thin removable film. It's one of these that I'm not a big fan of because they come off so easily. And 100% I would never put this case on the floor because carpet will any movement will just pull that off straight away. So just be aware of that. Around the back you've got space for one 120 fan, and they have included a fan in the back as well, giving you a total of 2 fans included. The rest of the back is pretty standard. They've got a nice cover that sits over the mounts for the PCIe cards. It's 2 screws to remove, and then the cover comes off, and then you can access the installation and taking out the temporary panels. To remove the glass panel, you simply remove 2 thumb screws and then pull the glass panel towards the back, and then it pops off. There is a rail on the bottom to stop it falling away. Opening up the inside, seeing it's got a fairly roomy interior. It's got a space down the front here where you'll be able to mount a radiator. That it's not There's no extra room available if you want to expand it. I don't think it will take a very thick radiator. I can see if I was going to put a radiator in it, I'd definitely put the fans on the outside and put the radiator on the inside. Or if you were going to do a push-pull, you'd definitely do that. If you put a normal size radiator with push-pull, I think you would struggle to get them beyond that gap. You could get away with it if you're only using a 240 because there are 3 front fan mounting points here. But because of the lack of space between the basement and where the fans will be mounted, I think if you're going to put a 360 in, you'd have to put the fans on the front side and the radiator inside. There are 3 SSD mounts on top of the basement. There are 2 holes for passing the GPU power or fan cables through at the bottom. There are 2 very nice pass-through rubber grommets. I am a big fan of rubber grommets, so it's good. And compared to the Lancool 205, which has got a bar, I'm a little bit torn on which is better in this particular case, whether it's a bar or it's the rubber grommets, because at the end of the day, if you've got a cable that needs to come out at this area of the motherboard, you've either got to come from above or below. With a bar, you can pass a cable through wherever you like. It just doesn't quite look as neat and tidy as a grommet does. There's plenty of room to mount a motherboard in here. I don't think you'd get extended ETX on there. I'd also say that the room on the top is very, very, very tight. So you're not really going to get anything other than maybe a couple of fans at the top. You would really struggle to install any kind of AIO or radiator on the top. I think your only real option for installing, say, a 240 or a 360 realistically is at the front. To remove the back panel, you remove 2 thumb screws. Now, one of the things I have noticed with both sides, whether it be the glass or the metal on this side, the way they've mounted them, it means that the actual case siding slips down. So the bottom screws in both front and back are very difficult to take off with just your hands. You've got to use a screwdriver unless you don't tighten them properly. Once you've taken the thumb screws off, the panel just slips out like so, like a lot of cases do. Once you've taken the bag of goodies out, and by the way, it looks like from the bag of goodies that the mounting system for any 3.5-inch drives at the bottom would require these mounting rails, so you need to attach the rails to the hard drive and then slip them in. There's space down here for, I'd say, 3.5-inch drives. The front, you get a usual bundle of cables, the USB top 2, you got your HD audio, and you've got your front. What this is a Molinex cable, which watched me wonder about this button up top, because it's connected to the front fan, and it looks like it's some kind of power to be able to control the fans from this button here. Now, what I don't know is if that controls any kind of lighting, because the fans have clear blades on them, so I don't know if they're lit in any way, and I don't know if that's going to control the lighting or it's going to control the actual fans themselves. I'll find out once I've done the building the thing. Alright, that's a quick rundown. Oh, sorry. There's 2.5-inch mounts on the back as well. That's pretty much all you get. And another thing before I forget, you cannot remove the 3.5-inch mounting bay. But what you can do, if I turn this round, you can see 2 screws here. So what you can do to make more room for a larger power supply, instead of having to move the drive cage, which you can do in the Lancool 205 and the Lancool 2, you have to remove one side. So there's screws underneath and there's screws on top of the basement where you have to undo it, and then one side of the 3.5-inch comes out. So if you've got a larger power supply and you want to put 3.5-inch drives in there, you may be stuck. Alright, now I've done a good rundown of the case. Let's do the old build montage, and I'll give my final thoughts on how it was to build in, and then we'll take it from there. So now I've completed the build, I'm actually quite happy with the case. I don't think it's quite as simple to build in as the Lancool 205, but it's pretty damn close. A couple of things that really stuck out for me that I wasn't particularly happy with. The basement is very, very short in terms of height. What this means is if you've pre-wired any cables in, like I wired up the USB 2 and I wired up the HD audio for the front panel before putting the power supply in, because the space is so tight, I had to retake those back out, and then I had to then put in the power supply, then reapply those cables because the gap wasn't thick enough to slide the power supply in while the wires were there. It was too tight. I've not had that problem with the cases, but I did with this. The other thing is Cooler Master. Wow, the fans you supply. There was a wire from the front fan which was connected to this Molenex cable, which was then you could connect multiple fans to it, which I didn't know it was for a fan controller. It wasn't at all. It was basically if you needed to connect fans to it to power them up. Now, the cables they give you with the fans that's in there, they are ridiculously short. What didn't help is the motherboard that I had, which was actually a pretty good motherboard, but it only had system fans at either the bottom or the top of the motherboard, which means that I wasn't able to connect the front fan to the motherboard because I didn't have any fan cable extenders. I am going to get some so I can then apply it, because in the short term what I've had to do is I've had to connect that Molenex connector up and power the front fan by Molenex. And the problem is with that is the fan itself is going at max speed, which is really painful. Apart from that, it's a good case. I like the mesh at the front. I think what could have been nice is, and I think, I would add additional fans to this. The fans that come with it aren't great. So if you're going to buy this case, you may want to replace the fans that's in there. But definitely, if you're going to put anything, a motherboard in this thing and connect the fans up to the motherboard, you need to get fan extension cables to go with the fans that's in there. But otherwise, for the price what you pay, it's great. Oh, the button on top was actually the reset button and nothing to do with fan control. And also when I highlighted the PSU fan filter cover, yeah, I had to take it off because it was popping off all the time, so I've had to leave it off. But yeah, that's where they've cut the corner to keep it at the budget it's at. So I hope you found that useful. Please don't forget to subscribe, like the video, because that really helps with the old YouTube algorithm. Don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified of future content. And as always, take care.